Yo, what's up guys, Alf here, and today I'm going to be doing a full in-depth deck breakdown of a list that I recently used to hit rank 2 with on the Arena ladder. And now before I get into it, there's going to be an importable deck list down in the description if you want to try the list out for yourself. And also if you're an MTG Zone Premium member, I'm going to have a full in-depth deck guide article coming out about this deck tomorrow, and that'll have a bunch more details, a full sideboard guide, how I change the deck for best of one, how you could potentially tweak the deck depending on how the metagame evolves, and some tips and tricks as well. So if you're an MTG Zone Premium member, keep your eyes open for that, and I'll also have a link to that down in the description once it goes live tomorrow as well. But anyway, with that all out of the way, this is my Gruul Stone Rain Eldrazi list in Historic. So obviously we just had Edge of Eternities come out with the addition of Eldrazi Temple, and this is such a huge power level increase for the Eldrazi deck. Simic Eldrazi was already a pretty powerful deck in Historic before the release, and now this not only increases the power level of that specific build, but it kind of opens the door on a bunch of other Eldrazi builds that just weren't viable at all prior to Edge of Eternities, including this one. There are some aggro builds as well that are really interesting. So this is such a big buff to the archetype. I do worry that the format is now going to devolve into Eldrazi versus Sorin versus potentially Lotus Field combo. And the play patterns haven't been particularly fun so far that I'll get onto later, but it does definitely open up the window for Eldrazi to be a really, really big dominant force in Historic. So I've been testing out so many different builds of Eldrazi, and this particular build definitely feels like head and shoulders above the other builds that I've tried so far. So I quickly came to a few conclusions when testing out a bunch of different builds. First of all is that I think the best way to build around Eldrazi is around these 7-drops, because obviously, Wizards have said that they don't want fast, very good fast mana in Historic. They've let in Eldrazi Temple and Ugin's Labyrinth, which are both conditional fast mana, which makes sense. But the big issue is that the only deck that really runs both of these cards is Eldrazi. So the two pieces of conditional fast mana they've allowed in the format both go into exactly the same deck, which I think is an issue. But because of that, these are obviously the two main cards in the deck. But because you want to imprint Ugin's Labyrinth consistently, I always feel like you want to be running 12 colourless 7-drops in order for that to be consistent. And I also feel like another card that has really increased in importance and power level is It That Heralds the End, because it's just a card that we can consistently cast on turn 1, either off Eldrazi Temple or off imprinted Ugin's Labyrinth. And this also makes accelerating into your 7-drops a lot quicker. So it felt like the key power level in the Eldrazi deck should lie in your 7-drops, because they make Labyrinth viable for a start. I feel like you really do need to be running 12 for this to be consistent, and it also synergizes really well with another card you want to be running off these anyway. So the 7-drops felt like they should be where the power level in the deck is, right? The finishing power. And then the second conclusion I came to quite quickly is that I want to be running Utopia Sprawl in basically all of my Eldrazi builds, because I started off testing, trying to port over the aggro builds from Modern that don't run Utopia Sprawl, but run, a bunch of lands like Cavern of Souls that allow you to, splash into different colors for stuff like Line Breaker and the one that you can kick for different abilities and stuff like that. But the conclusion I came to with those builds pretty quickly is that you're just having to mulligan way too often. It felt like those builds just had to mulligan if your hand didn't have an Eldrazi Temple or an Ugin's Labyrinth with an imprinted card. Those aggro builds also didn't tend to run 12 of the 7-drops, which made having imprintable Ugin's Labyrinth even less consistent. So it just felt like those decks were having to mulligan way too often. I still think Sorin is a tier 1 deck in this format for sure, and obviously all those lists are running Thoughtseize, which really punish you for mulliganing. So Utopia Sprawl not only increases your range of keepable hands, but it also increases your range of nut draws, your range of really powerful fast starts, because if you draw these in conjunction with Eldrazi Temple or imprinted Ugin's Labyrinth, you have some crazy fast starts where you can use Utopia Sprawl on turn 1, then play Eldrazi Temple on turn 2 into Sowing Mica Spawn, get another Eldrazi Temple, and then you can cast your 7-drops on turn 3, which is crazy. And without Utopia Sprawl, you can't cast Sowing Mica Spawn on turn 2, which is one of the best cards in Eldrazi. So Utopia Sprawl, again, felt like a really important card. Then in terms of the rest of the deck, I kind of was tweaking different ideas and came down to the core cards that I felt were just really, really powerful. So first of all, Kozilek's Command is just one of the main reasons to be running Eldrazi. I think it's one of the more generically powerful cards from Modern Horizons 3, which is probably the most powerful set that we've ever got. And it becomes even better with the addition of Eldrazi Temple, because it is an Eldrazi spell. We can use it to accelerate into Kozilek's Command, which not only increases your X value, but also speeds up the ability for you to use this for X equals 1, right? If you go just a land into Eldrazi Temple, we can immediately use Kozilek's Command X equals 1 on turn 2, which is already a great play to start off with. And this is huge. It allows us to ramp into our top end, ramp into the kicker off Sowing Spawn, which is particularly good. Provides us with insane card selection with the Scries, provides us with creature removal and graveyard hate. This card does everything. It's great in every matchup. It's just the most generically powerful card in the deck a lot of the time. So yeah, Kozilek's Command, huge reason to be running it. So that's a slam dunk 4 of. Summoning Spawn as well is absolutely huge with Eldrazi Temple, because not only can we use Temple to accelerate into it like I just said, but we can also use it to grab Eldrazi Temple. You know, before, if you wanted to accelerate, you had to use Ugin's Labyrinth and have a 7 in hand. Now you can just grab an Eldrazi Temple, which is huge, and it also allows you to tutor for Silver Bullet cards. So we've got Ghost Quarter in the main deck because the mirror matches are so big. But post sideboard, we've got Graveyard Hate, we've got Removal, we've got Counterspell Hate, and ability to play through, draw go decks and produce tokens and stuff as well. So Sowing Spawn, again, staple 4 of here, really, really key card for sure. Then, as I've explained, I think that it heralds the end combined with your 7 drops is a really powerful proactive game plan. Just gives you good stuff to do on turn 1 if you have Eldrazi Temple or Ugin's Labyrinth. So again, if you're running these 7 drops for Labyrinth, I feel like it that heralds the end is kind of a staple 4 of as well. And then Malevolent Rumble, again, provides you acceleration, provides you card selection, can find your Eldrazi Temple or your Ugin's Labyrinth, can find stuff like Sowing Spawn, which it also accelerates into, can find your 7 drops to cast or potentially imprints at Ugin's Labyrinth. So again, feels like another staple 4 of to me. And then we'll go over the 7 drops in a second, but outside of that, we have basically 6 flex slots in the deck. And the red splash for Stone Rain was something that happened fairly recently. So I was testing mono green and a few other builds for a while, and the ladder was just all mirror matches, basically. Like, I'd face an occasional other deck, but it was basically just all Eldrazi mirror matches, which isn't a massive surprise. Obviously, everyone is trying to figure out the best build of Eldrazi, and since it's new, people are trying it. But it's very clear the power level is there. I think Eldrazi is a step above everything else, potentially even Sorin right now. And so having played so many Eldrazi mirror matches, I really felt like I wanted to find a build that has an edge in the mirror match, because the Eldrazi mirror matches feel very reminiscent of the Devotion mirror matches, where play draw is massive, and it often just comes down to who has the better start, right? There wasn't really a mirror breaker in the more conventional builds, and I wanted to find one, and somebody boarded in Stone Rain against me in a mirror match, and it looked really, really impressive. So this was the first card I wanted to try, and I just thought, right, I'll try it as a 4 of in the main deck and see how it does, and it is insane in the mirror match, right? We're really naturally good at playing Stone Rain in this list anyway, because we have multiple ways to accelerate into it turn 1. Like I said, we basically always mulligan any hand that doesn't have either Utopia Sprawl, Eldrazi Temple, or Imprinted Ugin's Labyrinth, and both Utopia Sprawl and Imprinted Ugin's Labyrinth enable us to cast Stone Rain on turn 2, which is just good across the board anyway, but it's particularly punishing in the mirror match, because denying the opponent's mana in a deck that is trying to accelerate is always a good game plan anyway. Plus, there are multiple starts where Stone Rain is devastating if you hit an Eldrazi Temple, or particularly if you hit an Imprinted Ugin's Labyrinth or a land with Utopia Sprawl on it. That puts you so far ahead, and it's so difficult for the opponent to recover. And the other really nice thing about Stone Rain was that I just felt like it was good across the board in basically most other matchups anyway, because this deck at its core is kind of a mana denial deck, or that's at least a very big part of the deck, right? We have Kicker Sowing Spawn, which is, something that we can get to very, very quickly, and the World Breaker that can target lands as well. So even against decks that aren't Eldrazi, going turn 2 Stone Rain into acceleration, into Kicker Sowing Spawn, into World Breaker is really good. You have a lot of compounding mana denial effects, which is really important. I always feel like for Stone Rain to be good, you need to be combining it with some other mana denial, or it doesn't really work well with your proactive game plan. And in this deck it does. So Stone Rain feels to me like it works well with what Eldrazi wants to be doing, and it's the mirror breaker, which feels so important right now when everyone's playing Eldrazi. And from what I've seen so far, I think Eldrazi is just clear tier 1, potentially even a step above Sorin, which is very scary. So if that does remain the case, I do think Stone Rain is going to be the way to play going forwards, because it's so good in the mirror match. And then I had a couple slots left in the deck, and I went with Torpor Orb just because I feel like it's just great against the rest of the format. So first of all, it's phenomenal against any of the Ajani decks. Boros Energy is the clear best one right now, but don't forget there's still Mardu Energy and 4-color Samwise knocking about. But specifically against Boros Energy, which was the other tier 1 deck prior to Edge of Eternities alongside Sorin, Torpor Orb is just your best card in the matchup. It stops Guide of Souls, Amped Raptor, Ajani, bunch of the most powerful cards in their deck. Not to mention against the Sorin decks, it shuts off Saint Elender, it shuts off Juggernaut Peddler, it shuts off Dedicated Dollmaker. Creature-based combo is another way that I can see decks trying to beat Eldrazi, right? If Eldrazi does take over, I think fast combo decks are going to be a good way to counteract that, because I don't think Eldrazi are particularly good at stopping those sorts of decks. And Torpor Orb is great against all the creature-based combo decks. Like I said, 4-color Samwise, I faced Rosy Scurry Oak and the Brooding Barscale combo recently as well, which Torpor Orb is really good against. So because we're not running Thought Not Seer, because we're not running Glaring Fleshraker, it doesn't stop any of our proactive stuff. So Torpor Orb is very much a metagame call. I do board it out in some matchups, but it feels like it's so good against the rest of the field that it's absolutely worth running, in my opinion. Then the 7-drops, we do have a number of options to imprint at Ugin's Labyrinth, but for me, because how integral Eldrazi Temple is to the deck, I really wanted all of the 7-drops to be accelerated into with Eldrazi Temple. So even though cards like Ugin is very nice, and there are other non-creature, 7-drops that you can consider, because Eldrazi Temple is not only a key part of the deck, but because we're very good at getting it in multiples thanks to Sowing Mycospawn Spawn, you really want all of your 7-drops to be accelerated into it, or you're just going to struggle with, having Planeswalkers stuck in your hand that you can't cast. I think Devourer of Destiny is basically a staple in all of these lists, because the card selection that it provides in your opening hand is really huge in a deck that is all about assembling fast starts, right? It can help us find Forest for Utopia Sprawl, it can help us find Ugin's Labyrinth or Eldrazi Temple if we need, it can help us dig towards Stone Rain as well, which is really huge. So the opening hand ability is great, and the ability to exile, just creatures and stuff in general is really important. Being able to take out Saint Elenda is really huge. So obviously this isn't great specifically in mirror matches, because basically all the permanents that you care about are colorless. The Devourer of Destiny is good in the mirror match because of the opening hand ability, allowing you to kind of craft a faster opener than your opponent, which is the main way that you win in the mirrors. But it's also so important against the rest of the field to be able to take out stuff like Saint Elenda, stuff like Core Spirit Dancer. So I think Devourer of Destiny is kind of a staple 4 of. Then Slayer of 7 Deaths is another card that I think is crucial in this particular build, because you need to be able to have ways to stabilize, particularly against direct damage from stuff like Goblin Bombardment, or in the mirror match against Glaring Fleshraker. I think Fleshraker is really nice in the mirror because you don't have many ways to remove it outside of Kozilek's command, and it does just deal a bunch of chip damage and can win even if your opponent is ahead on board. And the huge amount of lifelink that you get off Slayer of 7 Deaths is a great way of stabilizing, and then just closing games out. This is really important as well. Like I said, in the mirror match, they don't really have great ways to deal with this because it can't be killed with Devourer. They need to get X equals 7 on Kozilek's command, and even then that deals 7 damage to them off the ward. So this is really important at stabilizing and just giving you ways to close the game out, because like I said, I'm not running Fleshraker, I'm not running Linebreaker in this build, so we do need ways to have a big impact on the board, stabilize, and then close the game out. And Slayer of 7 Deaths is all of that in one card, basically. And then Worldbreaker, again, is another card that is just phenomenal in the mirror match because it gives you access to land destruction alongside Sowing Mycospawn Spawn and Stone Rain. And you really want those kind of curve outs where, you hit them with one, hit them with another, and then the third is just the nail in the coffin. Because Eldrazi, if you do, flood out especially, can play through a couple of land destruction effects. You really need to be able to capitalize on that, and Worldbreaker can do that. Not to mention, it can remove artifacts and enchantments, which is huge in a number of different matchups, and it's recurable from the graveyard, right? If we don't pick it off Rumble, it just sits in the graveyard until we have excess mana, and then we can just put it into our hand and start casting it, which is pretty big. So Worldbreaker, mainly here because it's just so important in the mirror match, which I think is going to be the dominant deck going forwards, but it is just a generically powerful card. Like I said, I really want all the 7-drops to be castable off Temple, and there aren't really great options outside of Worldbreaker, but like I said, Worldbreaker is good in the mirror match right now, and artifact and enchantment removal in the main deck is crucial in a number of matchups. So next up, we'll have a look at the mana base. So obviously we've got 4 Ugin's Labyrinth, 4 Eldrazi Temple, but we also need to ensure that we have enough forests for Utopia Sprawl and enough red sources for Stone Rain and Curse of Shaken Faith. So the rest of the mana base, bar Ghost Quarter, is basically just for that. So typically I always want to have at least 14 forests for Utopia Sprawl, but since we have Devourer of Destiny that allows us to look 4 cards deep when it's in our opening hand, it allows us to more consistently dig for a forest for our Utopia Sprawl without needing to run 14, because it is really tricky to run 14 in here alongside enough red sources for Stone Rain and obviously Ugin's Labyrinth and Eldrazi Temple as well. So you can get away with it here because of Devourer, basically. We've obviously got Prismatic Vista here, which is really nice because it can help us find Forest if we need Utopia Sprawl, it can help us find a Mountain if we need red for Stone Rain, and it can also find Wastes here if we need a colourless for it that heralds the end, Kozilek's Command, or Devourer of Destiny. So, really nice utility as well, and obviously it helps thin the deck if we are flooding out as well, which is slight upside there as well, which is quite nice. And then outside of that, we do have one flex slot in the mana base, basically, you know, as a tutor target for Sorin like Spawn. And in the 75, I felt it was really important to be running Bojuka Bog, Blaststone, Cavern of Souls, Mirex, and Ghost Quarter. But right now, because it feels like Eldrazi mirror matches are everywhere, Ghost Quarter felt like the best card to be running in the main deck, because it's nice if you get ahead, just cutting the opponent off their Eldrazi Temple, or especially brutal if you hit an imprinted Ugin's Labyrinth or a non-basic with Utopia Sprawl on it, because not only are you cutting them off 2 mana there, well, I guess they get a basic, so you're only cutting them off 1, but it's a 2-for-1 because they lose the card that's imprinted to Ugin's Labyrinth, or they lose the Utopia Sprawl as well. So this isn't a card that you want to get every time, but if you are ahead and the opponent has an imprinted Ugin's Labyrinth or a Utopia Sprawl on non-basic, being able to get Ghost Quarter and just cutting that off is a really big deal. But obviously, depending on how the metagame evolves, I could see a world where you run either of these, especially if, for example, graveyard-based combo suddenly takes a big uptick in popularity, because I think combo is naturally good against Eldrazi. Then obviously, you know, Bojuka Bog is a good card to slot in. So this is definitely an interchangeable slot within the main deck. So that's the main deck. Like I said, Stone Rain not only works super well with your proactive game plan, but is so important in the mirrors, which is just key right now, I think. Then moving on to the sideboard, first of all, we've got a Haywire Might here, which is extra artifacts and enchantment removal on top of World Breaker, but it's predominantly here as a card to get off Fragment Reality if they hit the Herald's the End or Torpor Orb. Now, typically the decks running Fragment Reality, or the most common Fragment decks you'll come across right now, are Sorin, and I feel like Haywire Might is particularly good against a number of the Sorin builds right now, because it can be used to take out Overlord of the Belmurk in response to Dedicated Dollmaker or Ophelia Trigger, for example. It can also be used to take out Faith's Fetters if they've used it on a Sire of 7 Deaths. So Haywire Might feels like the best card to get off Fragment on a 2-drop. So obviously we just bring this in against, you know, decks like Affinity because it's generically good against them, but also just any deck running Fragment. And we've got Pithing Needle, which is so good in a number of matchups. So obviously this is great against Sorin, but it's also very good against Emperor of Bones, which I think is going to be another card that sees an uptick in popularity, because it's a way that you can build both Esper and Jund Sorin that has a way of going over the top of the proactive Eldrazi game plan. It's also good against Goblin Bombardment. It's good against Expedition Map and Deserted Temple against Lotus Field combo, which I think is another deck that could see an increase in play. Against the Planeswalker Eldrazi decks, it can be used to shut off Khan the Great Creator and Ugin, not to mention the more fringe combo decks like Shifting Woodland, Kethis, Yawgmoth. So Pithing Needle, incredibly good card in a number of matchups, very, very good to have access to. Then we've got 4 copies of Dismember, which is not only obviously good against Auras and Wizards, but is very important against creature-based combo decks. Like I said, I think Emperor of Bones Ulamog is going to see an uptick in play, so being able to cut that off is really important. I've recently come across, you know, the Rosie Scurryoak combo again, which again, you know, I feel like fast combo decks are a good way to fight Eldrazi because it's naturally good against their proactive game plan, but post-sideboard, Dismember keeps the creature-based combos in check in addition to Torpor Orb. So Dismember, really important card to have access to in the sideboard. Not to mention, there are obviously aggro builds of Eldrazi with Fleshraker and Linebreaker. Again, we have cards that can naturally beat those, but having more outs to those sorts of cards is quite important. Then next up, we got Curse of Shaken Faith. So this is one where I'm basically trying to preempt a metagame evolution. So in my opinion, if Eldrazi does take over, which it's looking like it will, the best deck to counteract that is Lotus Field combo, because like I said a couple of times, the Eldrazi deck isn't particularly good at stopping infinite combos. You don't have great ways to disrupt outside of Thought Knot Seer, maybe cheater cards out of Khan the Great Creator, which I don't think is the best way to build Eldrazi in my opinion. And so fast combo decks are going to be good against Eldrazi, and Lotus Field combo not only is not creature based, so you can't bring in Dismember, Torpor Orb doesn't really do anything, but that deck also is just main decking for Consign to Memory as part of its proactive game plan, which is one of the best cards against Eldrazi as well. So I do think a natural metagame evolution will be Lotus Field combo seeing more play, and if you're not running red or white, you just don't have good options if you're running Eldrazi, because the best generic card against Lotus Field combo is Damping Sphere, and you just can't run Damping Sphere in Eldrazi because it shuts off Eldrazi Temple and Ugin's Labyrinth. So you're really starved for options of stuff that's actually good against Lotus Field. But if you're in red, you get Curse of Shaken Faith, which does, you know, it shuts them off comboing. Obviously, they can dig for outs to it, but, you know, that's the same with any card. And I feel like Curse of Shaken Faith, in combination with your mana denial and your ability to get creatures on the board and start closing games out, is going to make it really difficult for them. Not to mention we've got Pithing Needle, which, like I said, can stop Deserted Temple, can stop, what am I thinking of? Expedition Map. right, if they go turn 1 Expedition map, shutting that off can be a really effective way as well. So in combination with our mana denial plan, Curse of Shaken Faith feels like a really good way to, you know, give us a good matchup there where most other Eldrazi builds would struggle. Obviously, if you're splashing white, you have High Noon as well, but I don't think there's really much benefit to splashing white in Eldrazi, whereas red, we're already running it for Stone Rain in the main deck, and we incidentally get a really good sideboard card for what I imagine will be the next evolution in the metagame. Then next up, we've got the final tutor lands in the deck that we can get off Sorin Spawn. So Bojuka Bog, obviously good as fetchable graveyard hate. The decks that this comes up most against are, first of all, Simic Eldrazi with Ugin's Binding can be an issue because, you know, even though we can get ahead on mana, we do need to have board presence to close the game out. Like I said, Sire of Seven Deaths is our main finisher, but, you know, Worldbreaker, Devourer of Destiny also forces through a lot of damage as well. Obviously, we can get tokens in it that heralds the end, but basically, we need to be ahead on board in order to close the games out. And the Simic builds being able to get Ugin's Binding into the graveyard and then, you know, bouncing our whole board is a way that they can potentially get back into the game. So having Bojuka Bog as a way to shut that off is important. Like I said, Emperor of Bones Ulamog is another way that the Sorin decks can beat us. So being able to exile Ulamog from the graveyard is a pretty big deal. And just generally, I think graveyard-based combo decks could see an increase in play. So shutting that off is quite important as well. So Bojuka Bog, very important to have access to in the 75 in my opinion. Then Blast Zone is predominantly here for decks with a lot of 1-drops. The main one that comes up most often for me is Boros Energy, which is, you know, being able to fetch this if the opponent has multiple Guide of Souls or Static Prisons is really big as just a way to wipe their whole board. The next time we've got Cavern of Souls, which is obviously here for counterspell decks. Now, I think we are quite good against counterspell decks because, you know, an early Stone Rain against them is brutal, but a lot of our creatures also have cast triggers rather than enter the battlefield triggers. Sorin Spawn, Worldbreaker, and Devourer of Destiny, obviously the main ones here. And those naturally do play well into counterspells, but we do need to get the body in play to close the game out. And especially Sire of Seven Deaths is very important to try and force through counterspells. So being able to tutor up Cavern to get these big creatures into play is good in those matchups. And then finally, speaking of which, Mirex is also very good in those sorts of matchups, but it's especially good against the Azorius Flash deck, because once you've got this in play, you can just constantly pass and pump tokens out every single turn. But the main reason it's here, I don't expect Azorius Flash to be that good because of these cast triggers on Eldrazi. Not to mention Simic Eldrazi having Ugin's Binding, being able to bounce their whole board on a trigger that can't be interacted with a counterspell is a pretty big deal. However, I do think control decks could be on the rise with Eldrazi because they are a potential way that you can go over the top. And having Mirex there in those sorts of matchups, in those draw go matchups to pump out tokens, attack down their planeswalkers, apply pressure on the board is really big. So this, I'm a massive fan of Mirex in any format where there's a control or just counterspell decks in general. So that's the 75. Like I said, I tried a bunch of different Eldrazi lists, and this just feels like it boils down to super consistent, super fast, good in the mirror, good tools to fight the rest of the format as well. So this definitely feels like, out of all the lists I tried, the most complete build. Now you've seen the deck, I've got some gameplay coming up, just got some matches so you guys can see the deck in action. If you've got any questions about the build, definitely let me know in the comments, and I hope you enjoyed the gameplay. Big up. Okay, so we're going second here. And I think we can keep this right. We've got, you know, Torpor Orb on turn 1, potentially into Malevolent Rumble on turn 2, into Mythic Spawn. So, and we are against the Lurrus deck. If we are against, you know, Boros Energy, Mardu, Sacrifice, or Four-Color Samwise, Torpor Orb is just our best card in the matchup. So, Thoughtseize on turn 1. So, what is this? This could be Mardu Energy, potentially. Could be Auras as well. Mardu Auras, potentially. They take Torpor Orb, so probably against Mardu Sacrifice or Mardu Energy, if I had to guess. Because I don't think Torpor Orb is particularly good against Auras unless they happen to have Juggernaut Peddler. But, I mean, there's a chance they're playing more of a discard-heavy deck, so I'm going to lead on Ugin's Labyrinth here. This could potentially play into a White Orchid Phantom if they have that. I guess we can still put the Sire back into our hand. Okay, so they do have Peddler, so that makes sense why they took the Torpor Orb here. So I'm glad we went for the Sire, because otherwise they could have potentially cut us off and imprinted Ugin's Labyrinth. Wow, they take one of the Mycah Spawns. That's surprising. I thought they would take Rumble, because then that cuts us off a turn 2 play. So definitely going to go for the Rumble here, see what we find. I think I'm going to go for Worldbreaker here. There's a chance we're maybe supposed to go for a land, but I feel like we want top end to cast off the Mycospawn Spawn here. Unfortunately, we are one short off kicking Mycospawn Spawn next turn. I'm still not 100% sure what we're up against here. Again, it could be auras because, you know, Mardu does run Thoughtseize and Peddler, but it could still be Mardu Energy potentially because I could see them running Peddler. Could be Mardu Sacrifice potentially. See what they cast. I mean, this turn should hopefully give us more of an idea. Wow, they just shift it back. So maybe that's a failure. Oh, wow, okay. Ugin's Labyrinth is huge. Now we can kick the Sowing Mycospawn Spawn, which is massive. So that was another big reason to go for the World Breaker there. Not only does it give us a way to, you know, another card to cast once we ramp off this Sowing Mycospawn Spawn, but it also gives us a way outside of Eldrazi Temple for us to cut them off a land. I'm going to go for the Mana Conference here because if they are on Mardu, which I imagine they would be, that cuts them off red potentially. So it looks like they have something at instant speed here. I'm not sure, still not sure whether that will be a Fragment Reality or a Shard Mage's Rescue here though. But I feel like we're in a great spot. Okay, so opponent smartly concedes. I still don't really know what we're up against here. So it's going to be difficult to sideboard. I mean, we probably should be cutting Stone Rains in this matchup for Dismembers, I imagine, because whether it's Auras or Energy, I think we should bring it in. I also think we should have Blast Zone. So maybe trim a Dismember to make room for that. Oh, wait, no, I realized I kept Ghost Quarter in, which isn't going to be good in either matchup. So I should have kept in 4 Dismember and taken out a Ghost Quarter. So I should have just swapped out Blast Zone for Ghost Quarter there, but hopefully it doesn't end up mattering. I mean, I'm thinking about keeping this hand, right? We've got a lot of stuff that we can draw off the top, but unfortunately I think we have to mulligan this one. Wow, 6-lander into 1-lander. I mean, if we had a forest, we could keep Utopia Sprawl there. Unfortunately, I think we have to go down to 5 here. Thankfully, we do have Kozilek's Command, and Dismember as well could help us get us through the early game, but not having any acceleration here is rough. But at least we've got lands. I mean, that's something. And we could obviously draw Eldrazi Temple. Unfortunately, Ugin's Labyrinth isn't great. I'm just trying to think here whether we want to keep the forest or the Stomping Ground. I think we're probably safe to go Stomping Ground here. But yeah, we definitely need some luck. I never really want to go down below a 5 if I've got, you know, a serviceable hand here. At least we have early interaction. But yeah, this game should be an uphill battle. Okay, there's Esper Sentinel. I mean, we did draw Acceleration into the Kozilek's Command, but we just don't have a card to imprint. So I'm just debating whether to play Stomping Ground tapped or an untapped land here in case we need to Dismember. I mean, ideally, we don't want to Dismember and give them a card off the Esper Sentinel, but if they are playing Auras, there's a chance that we might want to here, right? Or I guess, I don't know, even if they did play a Spirit Dancer or, I don't know, what we would want to Dismember immediately from Energy, we probably should just wait until our turn because the only way we get punished is if we draw a second Dismember. But even then, we could just cast both during our turn. So I think it makes sense to wait here regardless of what they play. So maybe thinking about it, I'm supposed to play the Stomping Ground tapped. Okay, so confirmed we're against Auras now. That's good to know. I guess the other advantage of leading on the Vista, though, is it does thin our deck slightly, so we're less likely to draw more lands here, which we really want to avoid. Okay, at least we didn't draw a land. So we're obviously going to main phase the Dismember here because we don't want to. Sorry, we don't want to play into a Shard Mage's Rescue, and then I don't really want to shock in the Stomping Ground unless we have to. But I also don't want to reveal that we have Blast Zone really. But I think hiding information here is probably not that important. You know, it's probably not worth taking extra damage from it, and I definitely want to hold on to the Ugin's Labyrinth in case we draw an Imprintable card because of the Kozilek's Command here. So. There's Thoughtseize. Wow, they take the Mycospawn Spawn. Now that is a surprise because now we can use the Kozilek's Command to get rid of the Esper Sentinel, right? Again, I probably shouldn't play the Ugin's Labyrinth here. I mean, we could to give us a way to kill the Esper Sentinel at instant speed, but it feels like they've got Shard Mage's Rescue from how they're playing. So it felt like the better opportunity there to go for the tap stomping ground while we have the opportunity. So here I'm going to go for Rumble just because we do obviously have Kozilek's Command, but they'll get the Esper Sentinel back if we do that. So I would rather use the Kozilek's Command to kill the Lurrus if possible. And so obviously for that, I just got to think for a second here. I think Devourer of Destiny should be the one we pick, right? Torpor doesn't really do anything outside of hitting Juggernaut Peddler. So yeah, I think we just have to go for Devourer. And that also gives us a way, a card to imprint to the Labyrinth here. Which, I mean, we do kind of want to have the Devourer in hand to be able to use, but getting a higher X value for Devourer or being able to pay for Sentinel and getting a decent X value for Kozilek's Command feels like the more important thing here. And then once we've used Kozilek's Command to produce some tokens, which I imagine we'll do, we then have more mana to be able to get the card back off Labyrinth and cast Devourer the same turn. So I think I will imprint here. That does leave us soft to discard spells, but I guess if they do have another Peddler or Thoughtseize here, we can just put the Devourer back in hand straight away here. So see what they do. If they have an extra mana here, they can potentially go Lurrus into Spirit Dancer, but then they're completely tapped out. Then we could go Kozilek's Command, try and find a Dismember. Wow, Sheltered by Ghosts. I mean, we can kill the Esper Sentinel in response here with Kozilek's Command, but we're giving them a card, and from the way they're playing, it feels like they have Shard Mage's Rescue. They've been very slow. They haven't, I guess they did just, cast a Spirit Dancer on 2 when they were tapped out, but, it doesn't feel like we're under immediate pressure to take out the Sentinel. And if we do take out the Sentinel, not only do they get it back and we give them a card, but we also then no longer have an out to Lurrus either, or the Spirit Dancer that they're likely to cast off Lurrus. So I think I'm going to crack a fetch and just ship it back here. Now we have access to both Kozilek's Command and Blast Zone here, which is a pretty big deal, right? If we didn't have Blast Zone, I think we're more incentivized to Kozilek's Command the Esper Sentinel in response to the Sheltered by Ghosts. But now we have Blast Zone. I don't think we need to do that. Okay, so they Ruckus, so I think we have to Blast Zone now because they'll get an extra card off the Ruckus otherwise. Now, they do get the Sentinel back off the Ghost form here, but that's not really a massive problem here, I don't think. And then they do go for Lurrus, and they can Ghost form the Lurrus here, which is, a bit of a concern because now Kozilek's Command's not as, clear as an answer. So what are our options here? We can obviously Kozilek's Command for a max value just to get a bunch of tokens in play or to scry for an out. I think we obviously want to take out the Lurrus here. I think we want to go Lurrus for X equals 3 and scry and try and draw to a Dismember, or another Kozilek's Command would be the best thing to do here. So I don't think we want to max out because we want to be able to cast something that we draw here. And I think we'll pay the 1. This is a low resource game. Oh, we found the Dismember. Okay, that is perfect. So now we can take out the Lurrus, they get it back, but then we can Dismember the Lurrus. We do go down, fairly low on life total, but even if they have Ethereal Armor, they would need 2 auras here to win this turn at least, and then we at least get a blocker down and we can put Devourer into hand here. Yeah, so it looks like they've got priority at instant speed. So again, from how the priority system's working, it's kind of giving away to me that they have a rescue here. Or they at least have something at instant speed, which if they're playing auras should be Shard Mage's Rescue. So we can't put Devourer of Destiny into play this turn, so I think leading on Rumble makes the most sense. And then we can go for Eldrazi Temple, cast it that heralds the end, and then put Devourer into our hand next turn, which I like quite a lot. Then we can take out the Sentinel, although, they do potentially have Shard Mage's Rescue, but at least we get a 6/6 in play. It's going to be really difficult for them to attack past. Okay, they go for Ruckus here. So I think I'm going to double block here. This does mean that if they don't use Shard Mage's Rescue or they don't have it, that Devourer isn't going to have a target next turn, potentially, unless they draw and cast a creature. But if they do have Shard Mage's Rescue here, I want them to use it in response to combat so that Devourer can remove it next turn, right? The risk there, letting the damage through, is that they could Shard Mage's and potentially, you know, get through with extra damage. But also, if they do have Shard Mages and we try and use Devourer to take out the Esper Sentinel, it doesn't work. And then they've got a Trample Menace creature, which is a real problem if they draw like an Ethereal Armor on top of that or something. Okay, Syra's a great draw here, so now we should just be good, right? I don't think there's anything they can draw. Even if they go Light Paws into Haste Aura or Light Paws into Ethereal Armor. Or maybe, I guess, Light Paws into Ethereal Armor might do it. Okay, no, they just scoop it up. So we got there. Nice. Okay, so we're on the play here. And we don't have a colourless land for it that heralds the end. But on the play, I think we can keep this, right? We have turn 2 turn 2 Rumble, turn 3 Stone Rain, which I think is fine on the play against most decks. And also, if we happen to draw Ugin's Labyrinth, this is potentially a turn 2 Stone Rain. So, okay, we don't draw the Labyrinth, but we can just go for Rumble on turn 2. Hopefully, we find a colourless land here. Yikes. Okay, no colourless land, so we can't cast any of the at the heralds the end yet. I think I'm going to go for Utopia Sprawl here, though, because that gives us a way to, you know, we can play it for free essentially next turn because we can use one Stomping Ground to put it on the other. Then we can use Stone Rain. Okay, so we're against a mirror match here. Not 100% sure what you know colours the opponent's on. But being able to Stone Rain Eldrazi Temple is going to be huge here. Interesting that they're on Dust Bowl. I guess that's another way that you can kind of close games out while you're ahead, but you need to be really ahead for that to be good. Oh, okay, we got Eldrazi Temple here, so I don't think that really changes things. It does enable us to cast It the Heralds the End, which is pretty big. So I think we just use one Sprawl on the other untapped land here, and then just going to Stone Rain the Eldrazi Temple. Now, they obviously have got the Eldrazi token, but this is going to put them back so far here. You know, they just put Mythic Spawn in hand. You know, they're essentially 2 turns away from casting that unless they have another Eldrazi Temple. And now we've got Utopia Sprawl down and we've drawn Eldrazi Temple. We can use World Breaker to take out whatever land they play next turn as well, which is massive, right? This kind of 1-2 punch of land denial is so brutal in these mirror matches. Okay, they do have Mind Stones, so, you know, they do have something to work with here, but... Okay, and another one. But, I mean, the brutal thing about World Breaker here is that not only does it take out our land, but it also puts a pretty fast clock in play as well. And we can now cut them off blue mana. So, interesting, we've seen the blue mana, now we know what sort of build they're on. Yeah, okay, opponent just scoops it up, so... That shows, you know, Stone Rain is so nice in these mirror matches. So, Torpor Orb is actively bad in these mirror matches, especially against Simic, because it gives them... Null Drifter for free, essentially. So we want to cut that, and then Bojuka Bog is very important in this matchup because it cuts off Ugin's Binding, which is a way that they can recover even if we're really ahead on board. And then I also bring in Pithing Needle because most of these Simic lists are either running Khan the Great Creator, 7 mana Ugin, or the One Ring, so having an out to those is pretty big. I'm going to keep this hand. It is a little slow, but we do have a lot of good draws here, right? We do have double Stone Rain. We do have Eldrazi Temple. This is a bit of a sketchy keep on the draw, to be fair. Maybe I'm supposed to mulligan this, but double Stone Rain, even if it's not, you know, started on turn 2, is pretty good, especially when the opponent's on a multi 5. So we'll see. If they have a crazy fast start and they can get a lot of acceleration down... Oh, okay. I mean, we did get pretty lucky here. That Sprawl off the top is basically the perfect draw here. I mean, to be fair, Ugin's Labyrinth also does it, so we do have 8 cards that enable the turn 2 Stone Rain here, but... Okay, they've got imprinted Ugin's Labyrinth. Do they tap it out? Okay, they don't tap it out, so... You know, they do get to put the card back in their hand, but still, we're cutting them off colourless, we're cutting them off a land that produces 2 mana. Yeah, okay, opponent just scoops it up. So, yeah, Stone Rain is just the nuts in the mirror for sure. Okay, so we're going second here. And yeah, we can keep this, right? We've got It that Heralds the End on turn 1, Rumble on turn 2, Mythic Spawn on turn 3. Seems like a pretty reasonable curve. Okay, so it looks like the mirror, looks like the opponent's on a Simic build, which traditionally is a pretty good matchup. The one thing we are a bit worried about from their side is Ugin's Binding, because that is a way that they can recover on board. Ow, speaking of which, 2 straight in the graveyard. So, I mean, we don't have Bojuka Bog in the main deck to fetch off the Mycospawn Spawn. We do have Kozilek's Command, which can remove them, but, you know, it depends when they choose to fire it off. And again, if we can deny them the mana, it doesn't really matter as much because it's going to be harder for them to recover, but... okay, interesting. I think I'm going to go for Sire of Seven Deaths here because we've already got an It that Heralds the End. We've already got enough lands here, and we're going to go for Mycospawn Spawn next turn. So... you know, being able to use Mycospawn Spawn to get another Eldrazi Temple, having 2 top-end cards that we can use is really nice. Wow, okay, pretty slow start from the opponent, which is great for us. 1 mana short of kicking the Mycospawn Spawn, but I don't think it's worth waiting, especially with, you know, we got 2 7-drops in hand, so using Mycospawn Spawn to get an Eldrazi Temple sets us up really well for next turn. So yeah, just grab the Eldrazi Temple. We could go for Ghost Quarter. Oh no, we can't because it's a basic forest. I was going to say, if they put the Utopia Sprawl on a breeding pool, then you could maybe think about going for Ghost Quarter, but I don't know. I feel like that's probably a mistake when we have these, you know, there's 6 drops at the moment, but having these top-end cards, it just feels better to go for them, right? We can go for World Breaker next turn, which can take out the Utopia Sprawl land and gets a body in play. Sire of Seven Deaths is also really good in the mirror. I could see just jamming that being good, but I think since, you know, we're ahead on board already, going for the mana denial is probably best here. And I think we've got enough mana here to go for Rumble into World Breaker, so we might as well go for that, I think, because, you know, getting the extra card in our hand for the next turn seems more valuable than just holding on to one of these Eldrazi spawns. So we'll Shock in the Stomping Ground. Okay, we don't want to sacrifice the one that could attack. Go for the World Breaker, take out the land with the Utopia Sprawl on it, and now, again, they've still got a reasonable amount of mana going into next turn, but now they're behind on board and really far behind on in terms of mana. And then next turn we can just go for Sire of Seven Deaths, which is going to start closing the game out really quickly. But I think the important thing here is that we're just cutting them off their best cards, right? If we let them untap with the land with Utopia Sprawl on it, they can just start casting their 7-drops. They could have a Sire of their own, which is difficult for us to break through. I mean, I guess we do have It that Heralds the End, which would make our Sire 1 power higher, which is actually a pretty big deal. But, you know, I think we're still in a pretty good position. So, okay, we drew Kozilek's Command, which is nice. I presume the opponent has a Kozilek's Command of their own to pass back here, so... I think we should take out the token, though, right? Because that just represents lethal damage. So we should at least do that, I think. I'm just trying to think whether we want to go for a high X value or not. I think I'm just going to go for X equals 1 here, though. You know, get to draw a card, take it out. Still potentially cast Sire of Seven Deaths, depending on what we draw. Wow, okay, opponent just scoops it up. So maybe they just kept a bunch of 7-drops and cutting them off the mana was a big deal. So here, cut the Torpor Orb, bringing the Bojuka Bog for Ugin's Binding, bringing the Pithing Needle to name. Again, we didn't see any of their Planeswalkers, but most of the Simic builds either run Ugin or Karn or both. So I think for the most part I'm going to name Ugin because that's more of a requirement in those sorts of decks because it's typically run as an Ugin's Labyrinth enabler. And Pithing Needle typically isn't very good against Ugin in coloured decks because of the passive being able to take out all of your other permanents. But in a deck like this where all of your permanents are colourless, we don't care about the passive at all. So Needle just completely shuts off the entire card, really. So this hand really needs an Ugin's Labyrinth or Eldrazi Temple, but we've got 8 looks at it because of the double Devourer here. So I'm going to keep speculatively on this one. You know, as long as we have one of those 2 in the top 8, this hand is pretty nice, right? We can go It the Heralds on turn 1 into, you know, potentially Mycospawn Spawn on turn 3, depending on what else we draw. So, double Devourer in the mirror is a bit awkward, though, because Devourer isn't that good. Well, Devourer, the cast trigger basically does nothing in the mirror, apart from occasionally, you know, it can hit Utopia Sprawl, but the awkward thing about it, okay, basically just looking for Ugin's Labyrinth or Temple here, so we'll get rid of anything that isn't that. Wow, we didn't find one in the top 8. I think we just have to... Do we want to keep Rumble? Do we want to keep a land? I think with this hand, we probably need to keep a Rumble because we can use it to find an Eldrazi Temple, and it gives us a way to accelerate into Mycospawn Spawn on turn 3, even without a Temple or Labyrinth. But on the draw, this is a pretty slow start, so maybe I shouldn't have kept this, because like I was saying, Devourer isn't very good in the matchup. You mainly want to use it for the opening hand smoothing and to imprint to Ugin's Labyrinth, because, you know, it doesn't actually hit anything of the opponents other than Utopia Sprawl. So here we'll grab our wastes and just go for Rumble. Hopefully we hit Eldrazi Temple here. I think we go for another Sowing Mycospawn Spawn. That could be a bit greedy, because if they use Kozilek's Command to take out our token here, then we don't have the guaranteed 4th land to go for Mycospawn Spawn anymore. But I feel like we're already, you know, this hand is not very good anyway, so we need a bit of luck to win this game, I think. They do have Kozilek's Command. So yeah, my logic was, if they have a way to kill our spawn token here, we're probably falling too far behind anyway. Okay, they got Khan. See what they grab. I mean, typically we'd be really scared of, yeah, liquid metal coating, but kind of a very weird interaction here is we can use It That Heralds the End as a way to stop the opponent from using coating as a way to kill our lands, because if they use coating on one of our lands, it gets animated as a 1/1, which would be pretty funny because it gives us another attacker to attack down Khan here. And I only know that because it's just happened in one of my previous matches. I think most players wouldn't realise this interaction. I certainly didn't. I thought I was going to lose the first time it happened, but not this is great for us, because not only does it mean they don't get a card off Khan, I mean, I'll tap it so that they plus. I really want them to plus here. Actually, if they're doing it main phase, they have to plus anyway, right? Otherwise, it doesn't make sense that they would do it now. They would wait till the upkeep otherwise. Yeah, so it animates it as a 1/1. I guess if they had Kozilek... Oh, no, they'd need an extra mana to Kozilek's Command that It That Heralds the End. So, unfortunately, even though it is a land that we can attack with, we can't use it to tap for mana here, even though it survived. So I think we've just got to attack here, attack down the Khan, see if they block. I presume they would, because that gives them another Khan activation and keeps it alive. Like a down tick, I mean. But we at least get Stomping Ground into play here. I mean, we're still super far behind. Now, even though I knew about the liquid metal coating ruling, I was still pretty tempted to concede here, because they can, they've got a ton of mana. They can just minus Khan and, grab anything, the One Ring. Right, they've got a million mana here. They could do whatever. So we're still probably going to lose, but, we've got a chance, because they did kind of waste a turn, or 2 turns really. They wasted a Khan activation, getting coating, and a Khan activation trying to kill our land. So we'll see what they get here. I mean, what would be scary? How much money have they got here? Oh, they got God Pharaoh statue. Okay, yeah, that's probably game then. Unless we can draw Eldrazi Temple or Ugin's Labyrinth off the top. If we can start casting these Mycospawn Spawns, we've actually got a chance, but we need to get pretty lucky. I mean, the nice thing here is that we can attack down the Khan, right? And I mean, we obviously know about the Devourer, but if they don't have anything in hand, there's still a chance that we can do... Oh, wow. Okay, Eldrazi Temple is huge. That is so big. Okay, so now we can attack down the Khan, which unlocks the land they've just coating. And now we can just go for Mycospawn Spawn, get another Eldrazi Temple. And now we don't really care about the God Pharaoh statue. I mean, obviously, it is limiting our ability to unlock our hands slightly, but if we can cast both of these Mycospawn Spawns, keep getting Eldrazi Temples, maybe we don't even need to use this World Breaker to target the God Pharaoh statue. I mean, it depends what else we draw, right? Being able to get on the board quickly would be pretty big here, but, especially if the opponent doesn't have much gas left in their hand. And obviously we did get very lucky with that Eldrazi Temple, but I still think, had we not drawn that and they did close the game out, we've still got a big advantage going into game 3, because we have Stone Rain, we have outs to their most powerful plays. I feel like our build has, a better game plan against theirs, because Khan isn't that great. It's quite slow. We've got a lot of ways to apply pressure to it if we get on the board early. Like I said, 7 mana Ugin isn't that great either, really. Like, it's just basically just draw an extra card every single turn, which is, it does help in the mirror, but You know, it's not the end of the world. Okay, so the Kozilek's command, it that heralds the end. So that does mean that these, you know, the expensive cards in the hand will now become 8 mana as opposed to 7. No, it'll become 9 mana instead of 8, right? Sorry, I'm not used to playing under Godfarrow's statue. I usually just concede when it lands, but we might actually have a way out of this, which is kind of crazy. Okay, Hedge Maze. And they ship it back, sure. Wow, okay. Ugin's Labyrinth, so that gives us more acceleration. Now we can take out... I mean, I'm going to go for the Ugin's Labyrinth here because, I mean, it does give them the Devourer back in hand, but like I said, Devourer doesn't really do much here, to be honest. And, okay, just check they don't have Ugin's Binding. No, it looks good. So we go for Eldrazi Temple, but this cuts them off 2 mana, basically. Like, again, they do get the card back in their hand, but getting rid of a land that produces 2 mana is a pretty big deal. Then we'll attack. And then I think I will probably imprint the Ugin's Labyrinth here, because these Devourers are expensive. You know, I'm going to cast both the Microspawn and the World Breaker before the Devourer, so getting an extra mana could potentially help us cast multiple spells in the same turn. And yeah, like I'm going to prioritize the other cards over Devourer here, really. So somehow we're still in this, even though they've got Godfarrow's statue. Again, I think if they'd known that if they'd known the interaction between It That Heralds the End and Liquid Metal Coating with Khan, they probably would have won here because they just grabbed something else that has a much bigger impact instead of the coating, right? Okay, so they got a Microspawn of their own here, and they do get to exile one of the Eldrazi temples, so that does slow us down a little bit, but, you know, we've got Sowing Microspawn, we can just grab another one. Assuming there's still one in the deck, they should be, right? Interesting. Shifting Woodland. So we don't have to worry about that right now, because if they Woodland Khan, the Woodland just dies, right, I think? Or it doesn't work with Planeswalkers. I've made that mistake in the past. So here, I think we go for Microspawn again, right? We can take out the Woodland in case they do go, like, Rumble into Ulamog or some... Emrakul, I mean. And we want to make sure that we have the Labyrinth untapped unless we need it for mana, so that we can potentially... we can put the Devourer back into our hand if they have another Microspawn. Again, it's not super impactful, but 6/6 is still a 6/6, right? It does make a difference on the board. So now we take out the Woodland and we can get the final temple from the deck. Don't have to worry about Ugin's Binding yet, so don't think there's much point, you know, getting the Bojuka Bog. If we were worried about shifting Woodland and we didn't have an out to it, you could potentially shoot a Bojuka Bog, but, you know, Microspawn kills Woodland with the kicker anyway, so we don't have to worry about that. So now the opponent can cast the Devourer and stop us attacking with the Microspawns, but, you know, we've got World Breaker, we've got Sire, which is a really big deal. All they cost... I mean, if they're going to cast Devourer this turn, that's a mistake, because that would just force them to exile their own Sprawl. Which, again, mistake I've made in the past, but, you know, you've always got to remember that one. Because it's not a May ability. Another Labyrinth. I mean, even if we imprint the Devourer, that doesn't enable us to cast multiple spells this turn, even if we use World Breaker to take out the Godfarrow statue. Honestly, though, at this point, do we even care about this statue, though? I'm kind of tempted to use the World Breaker here to take out one of their lands. Still, because I don't think killing the statue really does all that much here. Maybe that's greedy, though, because we've still got a lot of stuff we could draw off the top where being able to cast it for its actual casting cost could make a big deal. So I think going after... Actually, I don't know. Maybe we should have gone after Mindstone if we're going to deny them the mana, because that represents the potential, you know, cantrip they could use. And we could have obviously also gone for Sire here instead, which would enable us to close the game out quicker. Maybe that was the line, actually, because that puts them on a 2-turn clock. They've only got one blocker. They do have Ugin. Yeah, I think I probably made a mistake there. I think I'm either supposed to World Breaker the Godfarrow statue so that we can cast both Sire and Devourer together, or I'm supposed to just cast Sire and actually start closing the game out. Because if we have Sire in play here, we can just attack down the Ugin straight away. So I think, yeah, I probably should have just gone for Sire. And World Breaker, again, isn't really doing that much. We're either taking out Godfrey's statue, which is nice if we can cast another spell the same turn, but yeah, looking back on it, I think I'm supposed to just cast Sire there instead. Because now they're going to start casting cards off the Ugin. Oh, wow. Okay, so we can take out the Devourer here, which then enables us to take out Ugin. So again, got pretty lucky here, but had we played optimally and gone for the Sire instead, I think we're in basically the same position anyway. So we definitely want to exile, and I think we want to go for the tokens here. And so we should be good to go for 9, right? Oh, no, I forgot Godfrey's statues and played, my bad. So, so we should, exile and create tokens. I think, do we want to scry, actually? Because I feel like we've already got a lot of mana. Yeah, this is... Oh, it should be 7, sorry. Yeah, so exile, and then I think we go for draw because we have a lot of mana. But yeah, so this is kind of highlighting why we kind of should have gone for taking out the statue instead, or the Sire. So yeah, Sire definitely would have been the best line here. Thankfully, didn't get punished for it though. Got the out. Got another Kozilek's command. Got another Sire. And yeah, the more I play this build, or yeah, this build in particular, the more I realise that just getting... unless the mana denial is making a really big difference, oftentimes it is just better to slam Sire. Or I guess it depends the deck you're up against. If you're up against a deck like Sorin, where they have outs to Sire, like Faith's Fetters or, Fragment Reality, then it's a bit more of a risk going for it. Because if obviously it is going to deal 7, but it's still a 1-for-1 trade, and you've invested a lot of mana into it. But against decks that don't have a lot of ways to kill Sire, like the Mirror Match, where Kozilek's command is basically their only out and they need 9 mana to use that, getting down Sire as early as possible is usually good, unless the mana denial, unless it's early on, in which case the mana denial can make a big difference. But yeah, we're in a really solid spot now. We can attack, and we might actually win a game here with Godfrey's statue still in play, which is kind of crazy. So yeah, now having made that mistake, I'm not going to make it again. I'm just going to jam the Sire here. And even if they do have an out, they have to take 7 for the ward. I mean, I guess their out would be Ugin's Binding into Null Drifter here, right? But even then, that's only a temporary solution, and it takes up most of their mana. Plus, actually, we've cut them off that because we took out one of their blue sources, so... Maybe that... Actually, no, they could go Ugin's Binding into a 7-drop here, right? But yeah, I mean, even if the opponent had the perfect cards, it still doesn't win them the game, it just buys them more time, so... Okay, so they do go for Null Drifter here, which is interesting, and I'm pretty sure Auto Tap has messed them up there, because if they hadn't tapped the Phyrexian Tower, they could have sacrificed it in response to the Evoke trigger. Yeah, okay, opponent scooped it up. But yeah, managed to get there through Godfrey's statue, which is crazy. I wasn't expecting to win that game 2 at all. Okay, so we're going second here. And I think we can keep this one, right? We've got a very, very fast start here. If we draw like a Sowing Micas form, we can potentially cast it on turn 2. Even if we don't, we've still got Rumble on turn 2. Right, Rumble could find it. The Herald's the End, which we could cast immediately off the Eldrazi Temple, so... Yeah, even though we don't, we have got a lot of lands here. Having Rumble to dig for gas is very important, I think. Wow, okay, straight for the Wastegate Battle Mage. I mean, opponent might regret that when they see that we've got Utopia's Rule here. Although, if they have, a land that can produce green for them, if they have a backup, they could potentially hit the Utopia's Rule, which is pretty scary, but... Looks like they're trying to get aggressive here. Wow, they got the turn 2 Thought-Knot Seer. I mean, it's not really going to do much against this specific hand, but they do get a 4-4 in play here, so... Very, aggressive start from the opponent. Looks like they might be on one of the aggro builds. Probably on Glaring Fleshraker and Line Breaker, if I had to guess. Okay, we didn't draw another land, which is huge. And, I mean, we definitely go for the Sire here, right? It shouldn't even be a thought because all the other cards are pretty bad. Devourer isn't very good in the mirror. And then, we don't need any more lands, so... And we should just be good to jam Sire next turn, I think, right? As long as they don't kill the spawn token here. I guess they could have Kozilek's command to kill it, which would be really rough. That would probably win them the game, I'd imagine. Yikes, they do have Fleshraker, so... I mean, that does represent a lot of damage, but if we get Sire down, they need Kozilek's Command, I think, to win this turn, and if we get to untap with Sire, and we've got a backup now, which we can cast next turn, then I think we might actually be good to stabilize here. Like, this is another reason why, like, I did run my own Fleshraker for a while, and I do think Fleshraker is nice, but I just don't think it's necessary, really. And I think, you know, since we have access to Sire, we're not just, you know, dead to the reach from Fleshraker either. Like, the extra damage it provides, I mean. So I think we'll lead with attacking on the Sire first, because if we play the second one, it might change how they block. I would rather they block with less information, if that makes sense. Okay, so they just let it through. We go back up to 15, which is absolutely huge with Fleshraker in play. And again, you know, I've been killed by Fleshraker from a very high life total. So if they do draw Kozilek's Command into another one, we could still be dead here potentially. But oh wow, okay, they have a Sire of their own. I mean, thankfully they don't have it that heralds the end, so we can still attack with both. I'm just trying to think if there's anything we could find off Rumble here that would really make a difference, you know, some way to kill Sire, for example. But I mean, now we've got a mana hanging, we should probably just go for Rumble anyway. And we want to keep Ghost Quarter untapped here to be able to take out their Labyrinth if we don't find anything that we want to cast off this Rumble. Ooh, okay. I mean, It the Heralds... Maybe I picked too quickly. It the Heralds the End might have been the better choice there, thinking about it. Because then that makes their Sire not as good. But I guess now we can World Breaker the Labyrinth and still use Ghost Quarter next turn for the Eldrazi Temple to really close the door on them. But again, I feel pretty confident now. Like, our life total is going to go up by 14 here. And we've really limited what they can do, right? If we go for Ghost Quarter, they still have a basic here. Now they've got... Yeah, now they just scoop it up. So, very fast start from the opponent, but Sire, you know, the life gain off that is huge at stabilizing. So, I mean, they do have Thought-Knot Seer, but I think we should still probably cut Torpor Orb for a couple Dismember here, and then that gives us outs, you know, more outs to Fleshraker and Linebreaker, which again, we can beat with our proactive game plan. We don't necessarily need it like we saw last game, but, you know, just having a couple of extra outs is important. And then, actually, maybe... Torpor Orb, if they're not running Null Drifter, might be better to keep in because it does shut off the damage from Fleshraker as well as Thought-Knot Seer. So perhaps it's better against this specific build to keep Torpor Orb in. But again, I'm not sure how high impact that is. I still think it's probably better against both of those cards to just use Dismember to kill it rather than use Torpor to stop the damage, because they still get all the extra tokens off the what am I saying? Off the Fleshraker. But yeah, we got turn 2 Stone Rain here. So this could be pretty brutal. They do get a Linebreaker down though, so we do need to be careful about that. But Stone Rain the Temple, if they don't have another one, they could just be left at 2 mana here. And we can still go for Soul Marcus for next turn into potentially World Breaker the following turn, which would be brutal. Cut them off another land and gets a blocker in play that can stop the Linebreaker. Ooh, okay. I mean, that's huge. Now we can just kick the Micah Spawn and block the Linebreaker. So this might just be lights out straight away here. Right, we've cut off another one of their lands. And this is why I really like Stone Rain. Getting that initial Stone Rain down into a Micah Spawn or into a World Breaker is just so difficult for them to recover from. Yeah, okay, opponent just scoops it up. So we got there nice. Okay, so we're on the play here. And I don't think we can keep that one. I mean, if this Labyrinth was a forest, then I'd probably keep this hand, but I don't think we can keep that one. Oh, wow, okay. I mean, I think we've got to keep this and just, you know, hope for the best. We do have a Devourer that will help us find lands, I guess, but Yeah, so I think the best case scenario here is we find a Nugan's Labyrinth. Oh, perfect. Okay, we found one. That's huge. Now we got a turn 2 Stone Rain on the play, which is going to be good against basically every deck. Okay, Spybuff Canal into Tamiyo. So we could obviously Kozilek's Command, but I think use Stone Rain as early as possible as a rule of thumb, right? Mana Denial on turn 1 is just brutal. Wow, okay, yeah, opponent just scoops it up. So we didn't really see much from the opponent there. What does Spybuff Canal into Tamiyo? Could be Tempo, could be Wizards, could be Affinity maybe? I mean, I don't think we want Ghost Quarter. I'm just going to... I don't want to sideboard too much, but, we've seen Tamiyo, so Blaststone at least has a good target. And then, Stone Rain was obviously effective there, so I'm going to keep that in, but, if it's Wizards, then... Or if it's Wizards or Tempo, then we probably want Dismember over Stone Rain. If it's Affinity, we maybe still want the Stone Rain because, hitting their artifact lands is pretty good. Okay, so we are against Affinity, so it's good to know. Wow, they got the turn 1 Pinnacle Emissary. Really hope they don't have 2 zeros here. Okay, they just got 1 0, so not too bad. Aha, okay. Dismember's pretty interesting here because I feel like denying them artifacts early on really slows them down, right? It makes their Affinity cards 1 turn slower. So I think I'm actually going to lead on Dismember on the Ornithopter here. And we're going to go for the Ornithopter over the other token because they could obviously have Retrofit a Foundry, which could turn it into a 4/4, which is a lot scarier. So... yeah, I'm hoping that slows them down. Yeah, so see here, I mean, they did have a second artifact land, but if they didn't have the second artifact land, they wouldn't have been able to Thoughtcast. And if we'd left the Ornithopter, they could have Thoughtcasted for a single mana and still had mana up here, so which could have represented a counterspell. So we're going to rumble, try and find a land, and thankfully we do find a land that, we can imprint to Devour as well. I'm kind of tempted to Dismember here. Again, just to cut them off another artifact. Which seems pretty greedy because Dismember could be useful against an Emry or a Tamiyo. But like I said, I think just cutting them off artifacts early could be good. I mean, again, that also cuts us off on mana to accelerate into our 7 drops. So it's not clear cut, but... And it's really hard to tell how effective that is without seeing the opponent's hand, but... okay, new Tezzeret. I've not actually seen this in action before, so it'll be interesting to see how it pans out here. Untaps an artifact land, that's a nice interaction. Wow, Pinnacle, see if they got a 0. Wow, yeah, so they're really taking up the Tezzeret. They can potentially get it to the ultimate very quickly here. I mean, Tezzeret's looking impressive, but we're also a deck that just doesn't commit to the board, so probably not the most accurate judge here. So I think, yeah, against a largely colourless deck, it's probably fine to imprint the Devourer. And obviously, turn 3 Stone Rain is way less impactful, but we're not only taking out a land, we're also cutting them off an artifact here, but... well, they -3. I thought they would just play an artifact and then go for the ultimate. So there's maybe that means they didn't have another artifact they could easily play here. But yeah, I think going into game 3 knowing what deck they're on should make a big difference. Like I very much doubt we're winning this one. I mean, we're getting close to being able to cast Sire, which might be difficult for them to get past, but we're not going to be blocking with the Herald likely, which means we're taking, we're going down to 5. They're very close to the Tezzeret ultimate here as well. They can, at worst, just cast the Pinnacle Emissary from exile, so... yeah, it's going to be very tricky to win this one, unless Sire just happens to beat whatever they have. I mean, I'm kind of surprised they didn't cast the extra Pinnacle Emissary for extra artifacts, but... ah, okay, they got Thought Monitor, that makes sense. So yeah, Tezzeret's looking impressive, but again, like I said, probably not the best judge because our deck doesn't apply pressure. I can see it being significantly worse against, Boros Energy that can attack it down way easier, or Sorin where they can Faith's Fetters it. Well, I guess that doesn't stop the passive, right? Yeah, okay, Capra Cannoneer, that's more than enough for me to scoop up here. But at least we know what we're up against now. That does actually make a pretty big difference. So Stone Rain's out, I think. Torpor Orb's in, because that's pretty good against a lot of their deck, and Pithing Needle in. Torpor Orb obviously shuts off Kappa Cannoneer, Thought Monitor, Emery. Obviously not sure what the rest of the cards they're running, but it's pretty good there. Pithing Needle shuts off Tezzeret, shuts off Retrofitter Foundry, shuts off Emery as well. And like I said, Stone Rain can be good because it does hit artifacts. You know, if you hit an artifact land, it cuts them off, the land and the artifact itself. But you know, now we know what we're up against. I think what we've set up here with is pretty good. So this hand's pretty decent. We've got, you know, we get to look 8 cards deep with a Devourer, or potentially 7 if we find something good off the first one. Huh. I mean, this is tricky. I think we go for Kozilek's Command here, because then we can go Herald on 1, Kozilek's on 2. I think we still go for that. It's pretty close, though. I was very tempted to go for Utopia Sprawl, because then we can turn 2 Myca Spawn. But I think going Herald into Kozilek's Command here is pretty nice. And I think I'm going to main phase it here, because obviously Affinity does run counter spells, and we do really want to get this off. And next time we're presumably going to go for Myca Spawn. We just want to dig for a land here, really. Ideally Temple or Labyrinth, because then we can potentially kick Myca Spawn next turn, which would probably just win us the game, I'd imagine, because we just, you know, take out one of the lands on turn 2, and we're really far ahead on board. But you know, getting Myca Spawn down early is going to make a big deal. And the opponent's start is way slower. Like, Affinity does look a lot more impressive with Pinnacle Emissary, but it does seem to me like the difference in quality of starts when they have it and when they don't is pretty big. So definitely get Eldrazi Temple here, and then we can attack him with it. The Herald's the end, and then next turn we could either just jam Sire, which I think would be really difficult for them to beat, or if they have mana open for a counterspell, I think we just go for Myca Spawn. I mean, they could still, you know, we've seen Consign, but if we kick Myca Spawn, we get at least one of them. And it looks like they might be tapping out here. I mean, they want to make the most of Pinnacle, obviously, which is understandable, but if it means they don't have Consign up, or they can only Consign for 1 mana, that's pretty huge for us. Okay, so Thoughtcast. Wow, Thoughtcast should be back, so we should just be good here, I'd imagine. So I guess the question here is, oh, I was going to say what's better between Myca Spawn and Sire, but I think we just kick the Myca Spawn here, cut them off a land, get another land in play, and then next turn, you know, because we're already really far ahead on board, I don't think we necessarily need the Sire pressure yet, and cutting them off mana really limits, you know, it makes it really difficult for them to unlock their hand and get a lot of permanents in play, which is their only real way of recovering from this position, I think. If they had good stuff in the graveyard with Emery, I also think Devourer was a big consideration there, but we know they don't have anything in the graveyard to get back with Emery, so there's no point, you know, there's no rush to do that, basically. So they do potentially have counter spells up. Wow, yeah, okay, they're just too far behind here, though, so we got there, nice. Okay, so we're going second here. Oh, if the opponent is here, might have to edit this out if it takes a while. Oh no, okay, they are here, sweet. Wow, and this hand looks great, right? We have Sprawl on turn 1, into Kozilek's Command X equals 2, into Worldbreaker on 3 if it's uninterrupted. And almost always better to put Utopia Sprawl on a basic rather than a Stomping Ground, just in case the opponent's running Field of Ruin or Ghost Quarter style effects. Okay, so Jund and Faithless Looting. So probably against Jund Sorin, if I had to guess, which is probably the scariest Sorin variant for Eldrazi right now, I think, because they have, you know, your Thought Seizes to disrupt our early curve, and they have a Emperor Ulamog to go over the top of us. Wow, they do have Thought Seizes. That's pretty rough. So now they take Kozilek's Command, and now we don't have anything to do for the next couple turns, which is rough. Okay, Rumble off the top is huge, though. That gets us another mana closer to Worldbreaker. And we do find a Myca Spawn, which is pretty nice. So now we can potentially go for the kicker next turn, which, I mean, is probably a turn too slow, right? Getting getting Sorin decks to not hit 3 mana is a really good way of doing it, right? If you can get like Stone Rains and just keep denying them that 3rd mana, even if they have Sorin, it's a really good way to just buy you time. And to be fair, your proactive game plan typically goes over the top of Sorin anyway. It's just if they can get it down early with pressure, it can be an issue. But yeah, now we can go Mycah Spawn kicked, cut them off a land, which again, if they've got another land, they can obviously go for a lot of their powerful plays, but cutting them off the 4th land also prevents them from using Emperor of Bones and adapting the same turn, which is the main line that we're worried about, right? I think we can beat Elenda, but beating Sorin with Ulamog is going to be rough. Okay, so they thought they put a World Breaker into the graveyard, but we can still just go for World Breaker here. They did miss their land drop as well, so now we cut them down to 1 land, so obviously slightly fortunate that the opponent didn't draw land drops there, but this is what this deck does, right? If you can get off to a fast start on the board and then cut the opponent off lands, it's really difficult for them to recover. Okay, they do find another land. I was going to say we can put World Breaker into hand and try and hit another one, but Kozilek's command here is huge. So now I think, we'll attack first for sure. And then I think I'll just pass back because no matter what they cast, being able to exile it with K command is really nice here. And then if they don't do anything, we can just max on everything, get the max amount of tokens, get the maximum amount of scries going into our next turn here. So we can go X equals 7, which is massive, and then got another World Breaker, got another K command. That should be good, right? Torpor Orb not as good against Jund as it is against the white variants of Sorin, but this is still going to be great because now we've got another World Breaker straight into our hand, which we can use to cut them off another land, put them down to 1 mana. Plus, there's nothing they can really do to stop us going for lethal here either, I don't think. So put them down to 1 mana. Get in for 8. Having said that though, this is a scary matchup for sure, but mainly because of Emperor Bones Ulamog. So we definitely want Pithing Needle because it can stop Sorin and Emperor. We definitely want Dismember because it can stop Emperor of Bones. What else? We definitely want Bajuka Bog, and we're not, Ghost Quarter isn't that important here. So just got to make a trim of 2. I think I want to keep in Torpor Orb because of Elenda. Maybe that's wrong. Maybe I'm supposed to keep in it Heralds the End and World Breaker here and just cut the Torpor Orbs, but I'm going to try it like this and see how it feels. Because I still think Torpor Orb is good at just stopping Elenda being really powerful. And then World Breaker, it was good that game, but we're on the draw here, and we don't have Stone Rain, so I don't think it's going to be as effective. So I'm going to run it back like that, but there's a chance that because the opponent isn't on Dedicated Dollmaker, because they're not on Juggernaut Peddler, that Torpor Orb isn't worth it just for Elenda. But Elenda, the extra card is the main thing we're worried about. Them getting Faith's Fetters to shut off... what am I saying? Sorry, I just got to think about the Mulligan for a second. Yeah, getting Faith's Fetters to shut off Sire is very relevant in Sorin matchups. So we are putting back basically our only forest here, but with this current hand, I think every other card is more important, right? We want Dismember for interaction against Emperor, and Jarsil as well is another big one. We also want it that Heralds the End on turn 1. We also want to have K command here as well, and the extra card selection we get off it is pretty nice. So I'm going to go for the Labyrinth here, just so that we have guaranteed mana. We're going to hopefully find something good off this K command here. And if they Thoughtseize away the K command, we want to be able to ramp into the Devourer anyway. And Devourer is important in this matchup for, Saint Elenda, for Emperor, if they have to run it out before they can adapt it. So they go for a land, which is interesting. We could take out the token here, but I think we just got to pass it back because K command, the graveyard hate mode on this is very relevant in this matchup, and they do have 2 good targets in the yard here. So I think I want to hold it open. Obviously, K command being able to answer Emperor of Bones here is pretty nice, but we want to be able to take out both, looting and I believe they've got Ulamog in the yard as well. So I think we go for the Scry because we don't really need the tokens here. We don't have anything to ramp into outside of the Devourer. So here we take out the Ulamog and the looting. Which are Ulamog is the main card we're worried about, but looting also just, reduces the lines they have available to them. And we don't have a forest. That was the risk of putting back the Vista, and Temple doesn't really do too much here, so I'm going to bottom both, I think. Wow, okay. Needle is very nice. So now we can Needle Sorin. And I don't think I'm going to imprint on the Labyrinth here because we don't really have anything that we want to ramp into, right? We're fairly close to casting Devour anyway with the Labyrinth that we have in hand. So here we go, Needle. Name Sorin. And now we have Sorin on lock, unless they have an instant speed way to remove it. And we have Dismember available for Emperor of Bones if they do manage to get something else in the yard. I mean, they've already got an Elender in the yard anyway, so that is something high impact they could hit. But, you know, we've got Dismember for Emperor. Wow, they've got another Ulamog, but again, we should have everything on lock now. Wow, they just run out Emperor of Bones. Okay, they just scoop it up, so they must know that we can just cast Devourer to kill it next turn. Plus, we have the Dismember they didn't know about either, so